Our next guest probably a little disappointed to be where he is. It's never super fun being in Winnipeg, but the best thing about being in Winnipeg is getting to leave Winnipeg. And poor Darren Dreger, TSN Hockey Insider, has not been able to leave Winnipeg yet.
No. And look, I was feeling a little tough. Granted that I'm stranded here at the Delta, Winnipeg.
Yeah.
But now I'm looking back at you, and you're like in the cab of your truck somewhere. Like,
oh, that's his Bentley.
I'm in the back of the limo, Dreg.
This is the Bentley.
Driver. Worst driver. Yeah, he's the shits. He really is.
That's outstanding. So anyway, I'm at the Jets game last night, and I don't normally pay attention to what the weather is going to be, right? Like, I mean, all we do is
control it.
No, you can't control it. So somebody comes up to me last night, third period of the Jets Seattle game, and says, they know that I've got a place out west here. Are you going to your cabin tomorrow? And I said, yeah, well, that's the plan. And he's like, 100-kilometer winds tomorrow. Like, I don't like, I mean, every road between here and Yorkton, Saskatchewan is basically closed. I mean, the number one is open, but
yeah,
all the roads that I need to get to my place are essentially closed. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, somebody sent me a message, and I'll I don't want to say who it was, but they described it as a motherfucking biblical blizzard out there right now. So that's how it was described to me by somebody close.
Sounds familiar. I don't know who.
Someone close to the program. Really? So tell us about, because
yeah,
the Flames have got the Jets coming up. They had that unbelievable start, and now you've seen them up close and personal. We were talking with Noodles the other day, and I said it's going to be interesting for all you guys when you have to put your playoff picks in. They're going to be a playoff team, and there's been some who have picked the Jets before and have gotten burned badly. They lose in round one or don't, whatever it is, they just flame out. I wonder how many are going to have that faith or confidence to do it again this year. Will you be one of them?
Yeah, I'm starting to lean that way, to be fair. And they just feel deeper, and they look like they've got a higher level of confidence, and there's a more committed buy-in, if that makes sense. And, I guess it starts with the all-world goaltending of Connor Hellebuyck. I thought Seattle started pretty well last night, but there's a patience also in the Jets game where, because of the parity that exists around the NHL, you have to expect that there's going to be push from teams that are desperate, and that's what Seattle is. But Hellebuyck made 2 or 3 just 10-bell saves, just terrific, where, the group just goes, okay, well, that's what Helly does. He's a Vezina winning goaltender. That's what he does, and his numbers are terrific again this year. But they don't sit back. They continue to push and push and push, but they don't grow impatient. All of a sudden, boom, there's an opportunity. Nikolai Ehlers, I thought, was terrific in this game. He's just, he's skating because he's healthy. So he's got, that element to his play. He sends it back to Dylan DeMello in his 600th NHL game. And I think that was the second goal of the year for the Jets defenseman. But he scores with 27 seconds left to give them the 2-1 win. And I mentioned this last night in our coverage, but I think what the team is experiencing here internally is that maybe they don't have to swing for the fence at the trade deadline again. Maybe they don't have to roll out another first-round draft pick for that annual 2 center. They just don't need it. Sean Monahan, last year at the deadline, it was Toffoli. So what they're seeing now is with Nemestikov hurt, and he's going to be back soon. But they've got Adam Lowry slotted in that 2-hole. And I'll tell you what, boys, he can flat out play second line center. He can. Now it's a small sample size, so we'll pump the brakes between now and March 7th. Maybe that changes. But if you can visualize Lowry as your second line guy, Nemestikov is your number 3, they've got enough depth organizationally that you're not worried about your fourth line per se. So that gives Cheveldayoff maybe a bit more flexibility. So now he's not on the hunt for a specific centerman. Maybe he's just the best forward available that's affordable, or a guy that maybe gives you depth up front, and then you invest more on a top 4, top 5 defenseman. So that's where Winnipeg is at right now, and it's a good place to be. They feel pretty good about themselves.
I don't want to be the storm clouds, but it's Ehlers' UFA year.
Yeah.
Do you see some sort of a decision that Cheveldayoff has to make, or is it screw it, we're a 1 seed? If we have to walk a guy to the summer, we'll deal with it then.
I think that's what will happen. I remember Dave Nonis coined this phrase years and years ago, and I'm trying to think who was Bozak, Tyler Bozak, when he was coming up to the trade deadline. Do we sign him? Do we trade him? What do we do? And he said, you know what? Because of the team and how important he is, we might consider using him as our own rental, right? And that might be the case for Nikolai Ehlers. So maybe you buy a little bit more time. I don't know what Ehlers is thinking or his camp. Does he want to extend in Winnipeg or doesn't he? He's earned the right to free agency. So why wouldn't he go to July 1 and see what the market looks like? And who knows, if the Jets go deep into the playoffs or the planets align and somehow they hoist the Stanley Cup, well, then all bets are off. But I can't imagine, just based on the way he's playing now, how impactful he is. Winnipeg doesn't roll the dice and just say, look, we let that guy go. We're going to need that guy in the playoffs and ultimately to do what we're trying to do. So I think he sticks.
He does have a bugger of a time staying healthy, though. He's missed so much time. But yeah, he's a first-round pick. He's great. Yeah. I think I saw LeBrun talking about it, and I would guess as the season goes along, if things remain the same, is Hellebuyck going to be in the Hart conversation? We know where he's going to be in the Vezina voting, quite likely. But could this be one of the times where we rarely, but now might see a goalie in this conversation?
Yeah, and that's fair, and it's legitimate. I mean, they're the traditionalists out there who push back and say, well, hold on a minute. There is a top goalie award, and it's called the Vezina Trophy. You could say the same for defensemen, right? The Norris. Normally it goes to the top point getter, like who's the most impactful forward out there. But what's wrong with thinking outside the box when a player or a goaltender has earned it? And I mean, look at the numbers of Connor Hellebuyck here, fellas. They're next level. And I won't tell you who it was. And I'm not trying to flip the conversation, but it kind of bolsters what we're talking about here, specific to Hellebuyck and being most valuable. So I don't know that. Are you guys feeling a buzz with the Four Nations, or not even a little bit?
No, I think it's going to take the hockey to be on before people are going to buy in. It sounds like ticket sales are really soft. That's not good news for the NHL nor the PA, because they're supposed to be splitting revenue here. These things sold out. That's wild.
Well, I'll tell you what, and this is my own personal view. I didn't know that they weren't selling packages of games. Chris Johnson reported on that. I didn't know that. What I knew was because somebody said, hey, I'm covering the Four Nations starting in Montreal. And my 23-year-old son is like, hey, you know what? I'd drive up for a game. Why not? Checked online, Canada, USA, Saturday night in Montreal. I think it's the 15th. Tickets all over the place available. It's a preliminary game, but in the 400 level of the Bell Center, $600 a chair. If you want to get lower bowl tickets, and there's lots available, anywhere from 1,800 to 3 Gs per seat for one.
That's a good way to really nosedive this thing that you're trying to launch.
Who's doing that? But anyway, back to Hellebuyck. Back to Hellebuyck here in a moment. And I asked, are you guys feeling any buzz around the Four Nations? Because I think we could all appreciate every team that's sending a player to one of these four teams. Every owner, every manager has the same concern. What if they get hurt? What if my guy goes into this made up event, which that's what it is. It's an introduction to an international calendar. And I would think that there'd be more owners that would go, okay, I understand the marketing boon of all of this. Could we not wait for the Olympics or the World Cup? We're fine to get the calendar going there. Because, now if you're Winnipeg, you're looking down and you're seeing Connor Hellebuyck in the crease. Oh yeah, Kyle Connor is going to play in the Four Nations. There's an injury up front for Canada. Mark Scheifele's got a shot as a replay. Can you imagine if 1, 2, or all 3 of those guys somehow get blown up in the Four Nations, and your Stanley Cup hopes potentially, poof, go up in smoke? I mean,
yeah, you'd feel the same way if you're Cheveldayoff and the Jets if they go down in the Olympics. But there is a little extra sting to it, given that it's this is the fake Olympics or whatever Noodles was calling it the other day. But again, Rhett and I are on the one side and Pinder's kind of been on the other, but I do feel like I just don't hear anybody talking about it. Everyone seems to know it's coming. It's a month away, less than a month away now.
Yep. February 12th. Yeah.
Not great.
We need to see the hockey. I mean, also
That's a
seen
fair
this with the
point.
Olympics where you're like, oh, the Athens one, this is going to be, Rio is going to be a disaster this Pyeongchang is going to be. And then they play the anthems and you see the sports. Like, yeah, I'm in again. They got me.
Canada versus US, everyone's going to be wound up.
And in Europe, Finland,
sure.
Sweden is going to be really big as well. It's just not necessarily going to move the needle in Boston and Montreal potentially.
I don't agree.
Anyway, it speaks to
what's
the
that,
Hart
Rhett?
Trophy.
I just don't agree. I don't. We've had the conversation.
Yeah, I know.
If you could actually do a real World Cup.
When you say Rio, that's the Olympics, and people will watch events that they've never seen in their lives and know nothing about because it's the Olympics.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Vancouver got thumped by LA 5-1, I think it was last night. And JT Miller is back, but it's the stuff, you and Petey, that won't go away. Are you hurt? He says he's not. Just stop. The vibes are not immaculate in Vancouver. They haven't been all year, and they are not. Don't seem to be turning around.
Might have been rock bottom for JT Miller last night. Boom. They benched him. Talking at words. He slid to the end of the bench. The quotes post game. The give a bleep level on some goals against. It was people last night saying that might have been his last game as a Canuck. It was that bad.
Well, and I don't know that. I mean, I put out the feelers today, and it's crickets coming out of Vancouver, which is also in some way, shape, and form telling, right? Mm-hmm. But when I saw the media avail of JT Miller yesterday, I kind of went, "Ooh, this has the aroma and the look of a guy who's had enough." Yeah, he's had enough. Not of the media. I think he does actually have a respect and appreciation for the questions that are being asked, but I feel like it can only go one of two ways, right? Either Patrick Alvina management of the Vancouver Canucks brings his camp an opportunity, a trade opportunity, or maybe JT just steps up and goes, I got the no move clause. I've got 3 young kids. I'm going to protect my family. So you can drag me through the mud. You can do whatever you want. I'm not waving that thing until the offseason. And then I'm going to determine exactly where I'm going. I'm not saying that's how it's going to play out, but it's certainly an option that would have to be considered, right? As this thing continues to drag. And, as has been reported by all of us, it does feel like JT Miller, there's more action around JT Miller because I think that contending teams around the league look at him as a tangible upgrade. They can visualize, the grit that this guy plays with, everything that he brings when he's on his game, and they can see how that would upgrade what they have. Elias Pettersson's a little bit different. I watched him that Toronto game where Vancouver was real good, and I saw a different level of Pettersson in that game. I mean, defensive zone, he was getting in lanes, he was trying to win puck battles and all of that. Didn't see that I didn't watch that game as closely last night. But what was the game before? And they weren't very good in that game either. Anyway, he just it's too inconsistent. So and from Vancouver's standpoint here, guys, they're in a precarious spot in the standings, right? Okay. It's not like they can trade JT Miller to the Dallas Stars, who, by the way, have a ton of cap space, right? Because of Sagan's injury. And I'm sure they'd like to have him. And I'm pretty sure he'd go to the Dallas Stars. What has to come back the other way? Look at that Dallas lineup. It can't be a prospect and draft picks. I mean, Vancouver needs to compete. Like they've got to stay in the fight here. So it's gonna be curious to see how this all plays out.
When they moved Bo Horvat, they did it for a first, and they immediately turned around and turned that first round pick into Philip Hronek, who they've since re-signed and has been a great fit for Quinn Hughes and has just got back and healthy. Yeah. But it's a reminder that sometimes it doesn't have to be the asset you want that you start with. If you can get a first or two from Dallas, those play everywhere, and teams selling want those. So maybe it's a similar tact with the same GM and president.
I think you nailed it, man. Honestly, and I think that's why this is taking so long to develop. And that's because, maybe Alvin and the Vancouver Canucks haven't found that third party yet, or they just haven't been able to put the pieces collectively together to make that whole operation sing. But I know management in Vancouver well, and I've spent enough time around Francesco Aquilini, part of ownership of the Vancouver Canucks, to know like he will be hot. He will be hot, especially after last night. And look, he's got an ample amount of respect for Jimmy Rutherford. It's not like he's burning Jimmy's ears off the side of his head, but there would have been words. And I'm sure there have been many, many times. That's like, he's a passionate owner. I get it.
It's an interesting, the entire scenario is interesting because it gives credence to everything that's been said about there being issues in the room or that there's something wrong. And they've come out and said, no, I don't know what you're looking for. There's clearly something wrong. And when or how did it happen? They went to round 2 of the playoffs. They had a very good season last year. There was no reason to think that they weren't going to build again and be one of the top teams in the West this year.
Right.
But if it can go wrong to almost to the letter, it has for them.
Well, and Rhett, I'd like your just thought on this and your experience in rooms that you've been in over the years, because again, in Winnipeg last night, and I always liked Blake Wheeler when he was with the Winnipeg Jets. Now, both as a player and as a guy. I mean, boy, very similar to JT Miller in his approach. Like, he's in your face. If you're not playing the way you need to play or are capable of playing, he's going to let you know about it. And that rubs some guys the wrong way. And so I wasn't in Winnipeg when Vancouver came through, but some of the media assembled here said walking into that room had a very similar feel. The Vancouver room had a very similar feel to when the Jets were going through some real tough times with Blake Wheeler at the helm. And at that time, and this wasn't necessarily Blake's fault, but maybe it gives us a glimpse of where Vancouver is at. It's not just about Pettersson and Miller, and nor was it about Wheeler and Scheifele back then. But what happens when you've got situations like that potentially is it encourages clicks. So now you got 3 and 4 players over here, 3 and 4 over there, and the team as a group can never kind of find its way to that happy space. So does that make sense, right?
It encourages clicks. It encourages silence. It doesn't encourage cooperation at all. And the funny thing, not funny, but it's stunning to me that Tocchet and Foote and those guys that are there have
at least that it's happened under their watch, right?
Yes.
It must be so bad that those guys can't repair it. And
that's
the too.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, to me, that's like, these guys have been around, have been in rooms, have been those guys that pull things together. I think, from what I know, I don't know them all that well, but that's the perception I have of them, that they would see these things happening and have an idea of how to fix it. Noodles and I talked about this last week, and it's like, it feels like nobody knows what to do.
And I think that's real, but that's not an indictment of Rick Tocchet or Adam Foote or the coaching staff.
That's how bad it is.
That's how bad it is.
Yeah.
And you're faced with limitations here. Like back in your day, Rhett, honest to God, wouldn't they just they'd put curtains over the glass of the practice arena? They'd lock the doors so nobody could get in there outside of the actual team. And you'd figure it out. You'd figure it out on the ice, or you'd figure it out on the dressing room, but you'd figure it out. And that's the way Adam Foote would have approached things in Colorado, and Rick Tocchet and the teams that I mean, it's just unfortunate. They can't get that. They can't get that accountability.
Player, and it is what it is. And again, it's not that. It's not an indictment on that. It's not an indictment on the coaches. But it does create a unique situation where it's like, I don't know what to do. To follow up on this, if you go back a ways, Bruce Boudreau comes in and coaches Vancouver. They weren't very good. Boudreau comes in, they are good, then they're not good, and they run Boudreau out of town, which is fine. Bring in Tocchet, and they come along big time last year. I don't know that most people saw him being good, but not as good as they were.
Yeah.
And now you've got Demko, and now so what really are they? I think they're better than what they are right now, but are they as good as we maybe thought they would be? And which leads me into the real question I'm trying to ask is, at what point does ownership or Rutherford or Alvin decide, you know what, this isn't the group?
Yeah, it's a fair point.
And Besser's for sale, and these guys are for sales. We can quickly recoup. Yeah, it's going to be a down year, but we believe in the coach. We believe in the goalie. The goalie's going to be better next year, you got to expect, right? Do we just throw in the towel a little bit? Like, you would never say that to the fans, but there would be an approach. They've got a bunch of players that are really effing good, and if they want to move them, I think they could get serious returns.
Well, those 3 guys, right? In Pettersson, JT Miller, and Brock Besser. I mean, I don't think Besser's coming back. Here's the one, and it's the one omission from that list of names that I think would really rankle the fan base. I think you could sell a renovation. I do, because you got an educated Canadian fan base who are watching this group, and they can see that it's not working, and they're tired of all the headline nonsense and a rift and all of that. All they care about is wins and losses and a better direction, a better future. So I think you could sell, because you're not getting, like, who's going to rip their roster apart? A contending team, who's going to rip their roster apart to acquire Elias Pettersson in season? Probably not going to happen, right? Maybe in the offseason you get better return. But I think where you rankle the fan base in Vancouver is, what about Rick Tocchet? I mean, he's got an option on that contract. If Rick Tocchet decides, you know what, to the point we just made 90 seconds ago, like, in my life, I've never seen anything like this. And I've faced some adversity and challenges, and I got through them. It wasn't easy. I'm at my wit's end here. I don't know what more I can do to fix this. So maybe it's time we go in a different direction. And I mean, if that's the case, and I don't know it to be, but it's been speculated on, right? I mean, people are talking about, I think that one hits the fan base between the eyes, because I do think that the fans have a real appreciation for everything that Rick Tocchet and that coaching staff bring to the Vancouver Canucks.
Okay, so back to Rhett's point, though, like, do you think the owner would be on side with a step back for 2 steps forward? That goes against the grain on everything we've witnessed from Francesco Aquilini's since he's brought the team. Like, he is always win now, burn the boats mode.
Yeah. And I don't have a real answer for that. From a hockey perspective, I think he could be convinced. And Jimmy is a real convincing guy. Like, I mean, Jimmy Rutherford's got miles and miles and miles of experience. And I think he, of anyone, could explain how this makes sense. You know, do you want to squeak into the playoffs now and get dispatched and piss off everybody in Vancouver? Or do we want to make the necessary changes and build the right way in as quick a transition as we can, so that we're really good for a long time moving forward? And it's not one playoff, it's multiple playoffs, and away we go. And, you know, maybe the response from Francesco at that point is, well, I thought that's what we were doing last year.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like that's what we were doing last year. So what's going on here? To get back to where we started on this conversation with the Vancouver Canucks, Boomer, I mean, something has to give, plain and simple. And based on the aroma that came out of that building last night, it does feel like that's the final straw. So
yeah,
we'll see
and
how the weekend goes.
Coming to a head.
And a couple wins won't be enough. It's going to take a series of wins, or just some impressive performances. It'd be tough if you're a Vancouver fan, because JT Miller was an animal last year in the playoffs.
So good.
Whatever it was, November, I took my kid to a WWE event in Vancouver. They were chanting JT Miller in the arena. I mean, he's beloved there. So last night, the Habs win a big one. Ottawa loses but gets a point. They are both right there, 1 point back in the East, I believe is what it is now, but they've got games in hands on Boston. Talking about ownership, I wonder about a guy like Michael Andlauer, has his new team. They're that close. Do you kind of maybe tap on the gas here a little bit, Stevie Stajos? Maybe let's if it means, maybe we're going to escalate or accelerate things. And I wonder in Vancouver, because in Montreal, Kent Hughes came out and said, we're sticking with the course.
Yeah.
It's tricky when you're right there.
No, fair.
Those two will approach things here.
Yeah, and look, I both guys are very active. I guess I'd give the edge to Ken Hughes. He's already made a big deal in the Carrier deal, and that trade has paid dividends for the Montreal Canadiens. It really has. I don't know what you guys think of Lane Hudson, but holy smokes, this kid is, he's just something to watch. He's Quinn Hughes 2.0. I'm not ready to say he reminds me of Cale Makar, but I mean, you're talking about high rent when you put him in a conversation of development, looking at those guys, the way he skates and thinks the game and his vision and all of that. Everything is clicking for the Canadiens right now. But I'm reminded by Kent Hughes every time I ask the question you just did. They know where they're at. And sure, making the playoffs would be great experience for the young guys. It really, truly would. They're more looking at 25, 26 and not only being ready for, playoff hockey, but hey, maybe winning a round or two. And then that's just the ladder of development and experience that they're looking at. Ottawa's not there. Ottawa's in a different place. Like there's been money invested in that roster, obviously with Linus Ullmark when he's healthy. Go down the list, but Staios is shopping. Of course he is. He'd like to bolster that blue line. If the right piece is available up front, he'd like to add there. But they're playing better hockey of late. I mean, Ovechkin with the overtime winner last night, nothing to sneeze at in that one. But Ottawa generally now has got their secondary scoring back on track. So I think he'll try and do something. I just don't know how significant it'll be.
So in a different world where there wasn't an MFing biblical disaster in Winnipeg, and what would Darren Dreger be doing right about now? Say, it's about noon Manitoba time.
Yeah, well, it is. So I set my alarm for 6 a.m. thinking that, and I rented a 4x4 truck just in the event that, the weather was going to be a bit snarly. Just say, hey, you know what? It's a 3.5, 4-hour drive. I want to make sure that none of this nonsense is going to affect me. But again, I got word last night in the press box that something horrific was coming. 6 a.m., look out the window. It's dark. It's fine. It's perfect. My brother, who lives in Langeberg, Saskatchewan, sends me a text at like 6:20 Manitoba time and goes, dude, don't bother. Like, we're already getting tow truck social media alerts saying if you're driving, if you're heading out on the road and you get stuck or in an accident, we can't come and get you. And that was, I think, between Yorkton and Brandon. So here I am. And now, hey, look at, how about this for being the prairie nice guy like you guys are? Okay. So a neighbor at the lake, his son is in Winnipeg, he wrecks his truck this morning in Winnipeg. Somebody clips off his front end. So now I'm waiting on this guy to get all his nonsense sorted out. And then he's going to jump in with me, drive out 4 hours to the lake. Never met this guy in my life.
Where is he from? He's got to be a good guy.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's a Manitoba guy.
Yeah, he's got to be a good guy. Got to be a good guy.
So
do you have an ice shack out there? What was the plan going to be?
No. So my next door neighbor, Dougie Haberstock, has the Taj Mahal.
Oh, yeah?
He has a Taj Mahal. Like, I mean, there's everything in there. You've got barbecues. You've got satellite access. You've got cameras in the freaking holes so that you can see the fish coming up to the bait. In fact, I think he's actually got beds, like bunks in there. So and I don't think he actually stays in it, but you could. Yeah,
well, if you do it right, you do need to lie down probably at some point.
But to your point, the sausage will be frying.
Yeah.
And dry January could turn into damp January pretty quick.
That's calling it rye January. It sounds close enough. People, if they're not listening.
Grimy.
Or dry red January. I heard that.
Awesome. Well, you'll make it work. I never worry about you, Dregs. You'll find a way.
Because we love that stuff.
What's that?
Take some pictures of this Taj if you get in.
For sure.
Yeah, fire him along. Doug Haberstock. There's a name for the past.
Abby. He's a good dude.
You bet. Appreciate you, Dregs. Be safe.
All right, boys. Thank you.
There he is. He's a beauty. Darren Dreger, TSN Hockey Insider, our insider here on the Crystal Waters Plumbing and Heating Insider Hotline.
Hey, guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out more of our content right here on the Flames Nation YouTube page. We had a bunch of great long-form interviews. You can check out some videos we've done as well outside of the studio. And, of course, if you want more writing or merchandise stuff, flamesnation.ca or nationgear.ca. Appreciate you watching.